but now we have the actual election coming up. So it's really a timely program we have this evening. And like you said, I'll also be touching on some of the other advocacy priorities that we have at the state league around state level legislation. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, and for participants, if you want to put yourself in your view on speaker view, it's probably best.
Great. So my agenda this evening, we're here to talk about redistricting first and foremost. So I wanted to start off just reviewing the redistricting process. Donna's already talked to us a little bit about it in terms of grounding, and then go into a little bit about Montclair area legislative redistricting. So what's happened both with the district that contains Montclair, but also Essex County more broadly, neighboring districts for everybody here who's not actually in Montclair proper. And then legislation and advocacy update. We're going to talk about what we've been calling the Dirty Money in Politics bill, Senate Bill 2866. If you're on the email list, you've been getting emails from me on this topic. It's up for a vote tomorrow. We'll talk about what you can do. I'll also talk briefly about the New Jersey Voting Rights Act and same-day voter registration, to league advocacy priorities of good things that we want to hopefully move towards passage this year. So I think it's good to start any discussion of redistricting with discussion of the census, because of course the decennial census is what prompts and redistricting, because we have to redraw our state legislative and our congressional districts so that they are roughly equal in population. And the census told us that New Jersey is growing, and New Jersey is growing more diverse. The 2020 census shows that New Jersey is 52% non-Hispanic white, and it's 21.6% Hispanic or Latino, which is a 29% increase, big increase. 15.2% Black or African American, 11.5% Asian American Pacific Islander, which is actually the biggest increase of all racial and ethnic groups in New Jersey. So a lot of diversity, and obviously that diversity also is present in North Jersey, in Essex County, and that affects the landscape for the new districts. And it also goes into the advocacy that Fair Districts New Jersey was engaged in. So Donna talked about some of the work that we did in terms of advocating for nonpartisan redistricting. Fair Districts New Jersey's principles are first that we prioritize public engagement. So we called for a redistricting process that brings the public in so that actual citizens who are going to be affected by these decisions are part of the process, and that it's not what it has been perhaps traditionally, unfortunately, a backroom political process driven by insiders to benefit themselves. And so for the first time, the commission agreed to hold at least 10 public hearings, which was a win for our advocacy, because in prior cycles, the commissions had held between 3 and 5 meetings, depending on whether you're talking about the congressional or the state legislative commission. So 10 public hearings was a big improvement, and a lot more people were able to testify this year and get involved than ever before. Second, Fair Districts Coalition advocated for a racial equity provision in terms of the requirements that a map should meet to reinforce the principles of the Voting Rights Act. So saying that when you're looking at how you're going to draw your districts, you should do that in a way that's mindful of changing demographics and to make sure that districts allow all groups to have an equal ability to participate in the political process. Third, we advocated for preservation of communities of interest. What that means is we advocated for communities that had stuff in common, that had school districts in common, that had watersheds in common, that had transit networks in common, that understood themselves to be a community with shared common interests, to be able to be in a district together so they could advocate for those interests. And that's obviously a very, varied thing based on different parts of the state, different communities, but it goes back to the public engagement point, that communities should be able to advocate for themselves to be represented in the redistricting process. And then fourth, we obviously advocated that redistricting be done in a nonpartisan manner, that the plan should not be drawn to favor or disfavor any office holder, any candidate, or any political party. The redistricting process in New Jersey isn't a partisan gerrymander in the most egregious sense, but it is a bipartisan gerrymander in the sense that it's done by a commission of the two political parties. And so they're able to draw a map that can benefit them, and that's historically what's been done. I'm not going to get into congressional redistricting because that would take us maybe a little bit too far afield and beyond the scope this evening, but I'll talk a little bit about legislative redistricting since that's of particular interest, given that we are in a state legislative election year. So legislative redistricting in New Jersey saw an additional historic first. The first being more public hearings than ever. The second being we saw the first public release of draft redistricting maps in New Jersey history. So the commission put out 2 maps for the public to look at before they actually voted on a final map. They called those 2 maps Turnpike and Parkway. One was the Democratic map, one was the Republican map. And the public was able to look at those, testify, and give feedback on those map proposals. That may not sound revolutionary. In fact, it's kind of the ordinary process in lots of states, but in New Jersey, a lot of this has been done historically, like I said, in back rooms. And so this was a first for New Jersey, getting the public to actually participate in that way. And then another first this year in the commission ultimately had a bipartisan compromise map. Typically we have in New Jersey redistricting, we have equal partisan delegations, 5 and 5, Democrats and Republicans, and then an independent tiebreaker who ends up voting for one of the 2 parties' maps. This year, the independent tiebreaker, Judge Karchman, who was advocating for public release of draft maps, was also advocating that the 2 parties work together and come up with a consensus map. And ultimately, they did. The map was voted on 9-2, and the commission certified that final compromise map February 18th of last year. A little bit about that final compromise map. It is, I think, it falls short of some of the standards that we as a coalition had set. And I think it points to, even though it in many ways, it's a remarkable achievement, it's the process working as it was intended to work, it still falls short because we have a map that's ultimately geared towards protecting incumbents, right? One interesting thing is, the compromise map does not create a plurality Asian district in central Jersey. That's a source of, lots of growth in the Asian American population. And actually the Republican proposal and the Fair District Union map both had an Asian plurality district in central Jersey. That didn't make it into the final map. And then also because it's in the nature of it being a sort of a incumbent protection map that the 2 parties agreed to, only 7 incumbents are moved from their current districts by the compromise map, which is fewer than in the Democratic proposal and the Republican proposal. As you can imagine, the Democratic proposal involved more Republicans getting moved around. The Republican proposal involved more Democrats getting moved around. When they came together to compromise, that was left at a relative minimum. Although, of course, in Essex County, we do have some incumbents being put together, but that's a little bit of an exception being statewide. So next, I want to talk about some redistricting resources. Because I know lots of people have questions about what is my district, how is my district changed? And so Fair Districts New Jersey, on our website, we have developed an interactive tool to help you see how your district has changed. And what you can do is you can enter your town or address, and you'll be shown your new and your old districts, the towns that are added and removed, and demographic information for the new districts. I'm just going to go through and demonstrate that for us now. Can everybody still see my screen? There we go.
Yes.
Excellent. So you go on fairdistrictsnj.org, scroll down, find your district. I'm sure plenty of you have already used this, but you can enter your.
Oh, Phil, hold on a second. Yeah, we're not seeing the that website yet.
Let me reshare and make sure that you are seeing what I'm seeing. How about now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So fairdistrictsnj.org, you scroll down, find your district, and you can enter your street address. That's optional. You can also just put in your municipality. So let's just say, for instance, maybe we're going to see what's happened in Montclair. You hit search. And since we've selected legislative district, we get to see the change. Your old district is District 34 with senators and assembly members listed. Your new district is District 27, and you can zoom in to see a map of the old district and a map of the new district. And we see that they're pretty different. And then to see more, you can come down here to see the other towns in your district are now Clifton, Livingston, Milburn, Roseland, West Orange, and compare that to the City of Orange, Clifton, East Orange in the old district map. You can see towns added and towns removed. Now those are going to be relative to District 34, not District 27. So it's not that the old District 27 had Caldwell and Essex, Fells, etc., but District 34 used to. And then I think this is very interesting. You can also scroll down and compare district demographics. So for example, the old district was 73.5% white, 12.9% black, 9.2% Asian, 7.7% Hispanic or Latino. And we see it's really quite different. It's a majority minority district now with 48.8% white, 7.9% black, 12.8% Asian, 0.09% American Indian, 0.02% Native American, 0.76 other race, and 22.18 Hispanic or Latino. So big demographic shift with these new boundaries. And so I think this is a great tool that you can share for folks who are interested in finding out, first, what is my district and what are the boundaries? And second, maybe, what are the demographics and how has it changed? So I'm gonna.
Philip, I just want to point out to just for the members here that now that Livingston is part of District 27 and we're in the same now district, Montclair, we're now overlapping with Livingston, that league, we should be thinking about in the future of joining forces with them, perhaps for candidates forums, et cetera, for the district. Before we were in different districts, so there wasn't, opportunity to, collaborate on stuff like that. But now we probably should be going out of our way and looking for opportunities to do that. So that's just something to keep in mind for those of us working in voter services.
Absolutely. And also, involved in advocacy with your legislators too. I mean, sometimes you have a district that's, spanning these multiple towns. Maybe there's a legislator representing you who is actually from Livingston and you want to reach out to the Livingston League. They might have all sorts of things like that, really useful to do. So I'll get back to my presentation. Next step, I want to just talk a little bit about the districts themselves in Essex and how they've changed. So obviously, as was said, we now have the new 27th legislative district, combining Montclair and Livingston, with other towns being Milburn, Roseland, West Orange, and Clifton. As I'm sure you all know, this version of the district puts Senators Gill and Cody in the same district, and so that's why there's a primary with two contested slates, with I believe the Essex party endorsement for Senator Cody. And I think this is interesting. The draft maps from both parties, the initial maps that they put out, would have added Irvington and Hillside to the existing 27th district. And so this was kind of a very last minute change, it seems, where the final map instead moved Montclair and Clifton from the 34th district to the 27th. I can't really offer too much in terms of criminology or behind the scenes why that change was made at the last minute, but it wasn't something that had been talked about, it seems, until the very end. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other districts, neighboring districts, in brief. The 28th district, neighboring district, that's where Irvington, Maplewood ended up with South Orange, and most of the west and south wards of Newark, as well as Hillside in Union County. Hillside sort of switched, used to be in a Union County district, and now it's sort of back with the rest, mostly Essex district. Then we have District 29, the rest of Newark, plus East Newark and Harrison. District 34 is changed substantially. It's now composed of Belleville, Bloomfield, City of Orange, East Orange, Glen Ridge, and Nutley. And then District 40 is going up to Passaic and Bergen counties, containing lots of towns. I'm not going to read all of them. And it remains a fairly Republican district. One last point I want to make on redistricting in Essex In this compromise final legislative map, people of color are packed into a smaller number of districts in some areas of the state. So the 28th district we were just talking about is 72% Black per the 2020 census. And when you're looking at redistricting, when you're looking at effective representation, when you have a particular group that's at a very high concentration in a district, it is often judged the case that that's harder for them to have the most representation possible. Their voting power is concentrated in one district as opposed to being put into, for example, two districts where they're at 45% or something like that. And so by comparison, the Fair Districts map proposal that our coalition put together, had 3 majority Black districts, in Essex County. And that's rather different than having, this one district that's 72%. In addition, if we look over at Hudson County, they have a district that is 68% Hispanic. So the way that you draw districts can have a big impact in terms of who's elected, kind of almost regardless of what the census results tell us. So that's something that I think points to what we said at the beginning, that there's still room for reform to make this a fair redistricting process in New Jersey. So that's the end of my redistricting segment. Donna, I don't know if you want me to take questions now on redistricting or wait till the end.
Maybe you should go through everything and then you can stop sharing and we can just have a discussion, I'll be great for that.
So like I said, there's a quick advocacy and legislation update. Tomorrow, Senate Bill 2866, A4372, the so-called Elections Transparency Act that State League has been opposing, very consistently and pretty loudly for 9 months, since June of last year. It's up for a final vote in the Assembly and in the Senate tomorrow. And so we are going to be lobbying in the State House. You are all welcome to come and join us down in Trenton at 11. But if you can't make it, which I completely understand, there's still a final opportunity to call your assembly members, call your senator, and let them know that we oppose this bill and all the reasons that we do oppose it. If you can make it, you can RSVP at this link, which I'll put in the chat once I'm through with these slides. I know probably most of you have already gotten some of the information about this bill and why we oppose it through the emails, but I did want to review it a little bit just so everybody knows. So firstly, the bill doubles all the contribution limits. So you can go from donating a maximum of $37,000 to a county political party under current law to this bill doubles it to $74,000. And in addition to that, recent amendments to the bill add new slush funds, new housekeeping accounts for political parties, which are supposedly used for non-political expenses, but basically allow them to take an additional increment that effectively triples the contribution of political parties. So you go from $37,000 under current law to $112,000 approximately with this new bill overnight. And that's a big change. That's a lot of new money coming into the system, and it primarily benefits those who can write 6-figure checks to political parties, so the wealthiest and the special interests that are able to influence the system through contributions. Second, the bill, and this is something that we've been really concerned about since the very beginning, it sunsets all local pay-to-play ordinances. So it repeals all of your county and municipal rules that you might have put in place that limit pay-to-play, and instead it replaces that with state law. And state law has plenty of loopholes, which are not fixed by this bill. So it does away with the ability of towns and municipalities to actually address those issues. And then recent amendments to the bill actually expand loopholes in the pay-to-play law to cover executive branch contracts. So, for essentially 20 years since the pay-to-play law was passed back in 2004, 2005, executive agency contracts were pretty much protected. And if you got a big state contract, you weren't able to give money to the governor, the lieutenant governor. That would also go away with this bill. Third, the recent amendments to this bill allow the governor to appoint 4 commissioners to ELEC, our nonpartisan, our independent campaign finance watchdog, and it allows him to do so without Senate confirmation. So that's circumventing the ordinary checks and balances where the governor, who could normally nominate 4 people, but they would have to go through the Senate. And so our concern with this is, it short circuits public debate, and it means there won't be a guarantee that ELEC will remain independent, frankly, or bipartisan. And then fourth, the bill retroactively reduces the statute of limitations for campaign finance violations from what it currently is 10 years all the way down to 2 years, which means 80% of the active investigations that ELEC has right now, which go back maybe 3, maybe 4 years, those would be killed automatically. And this comes after ELEC announced in January of this year, some investigations into some of the biggest committees. So that's deeply concerning, and pretty much the antithesis of good government. So lots of bad things in this bill. Is there anything positive at all? And why would they even call it a transparency bill? So the bill does have some transparency provisions. It has some provisions that would require disclosure from dark money entities that spend money to influence political campaigns. And that's positive. It's certainly positive intent, but in practice, it's not quite strong enough. Although the bill does have some language that would require some disclosure, the definitions in the bill and the kind of organizations covered aren't really meeting the standard that we would like to see. Certainly the standard that's been set nationally in terms of federal legislation, the Disclose Act, or the best practices of other states. So we could do a lot better on the transparency side. And there is another positive in the bill, which I'll note. It does boost up the gubernatorial public financing program, which they're going to be adding a lot more money into the system. That is at least a necessity to keep that a somewhat viable option. But bottom line, we definitely desperately do need dark money to be disclosed, as it influences campaigns and is spent to affect elections. But it can't come at the expense of our ethics and our campaign finance laws. So we beat this bill back before several times, and it was because of all of you, frankly, of constituent calls and pressure, of legislators they don't necessarily hear from constituents on most of the bills that they're voting on. When they start to hear a drumbeat from folks, they get a little concerned. And that's really our tool, the one thing that we can still keep using to try to stop this one last time. So what you can do is you can call your legislators tomorrow morning, or like I said at the top, even join us in Trenton at 11 a.m. to lobby at the State House tomorrow. So that's campaign finance. Now I'm going to talk about 2 actually good bills that we would like to see move, which are not currently up for a vote, but we are advocating for. The first of those 2 is the New Jersey Voting Rights Act. So this year, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act of New Jersey was introduced in the legislature, and the league is part of a coalition with a bunch of other organizations advocating for that bill and a strong version of it to be put into law. So we're advocating for a strong version of a state VRA that includes, pre-clearance, that includes language access provisions, and rules to stop gerrymandering at the county and municipal level. So pre-clearance, as many of you might know, Section 5 of the Federal Voting Rights Act was this really strong tool that the federal government had to stop voter suppression around the country. And then the US Supreme Court got rid of it. And so this was kind of the jewel in the Voting Rights Act, which we lost. And so now, with the Federal Voting Rights Act sort of under assault in the courts and as a much weaker tool, state voting rights acts are the next step. And so putting in place a pre-clearance provision like there existed in the Federal Voting Rights Act, pre-clearance provision basically requiring that if you're making a change in elections procedures or elections rules, and you have a history of discrimination in your jurisdiction, you have to get that change approved first by an independent body, either a voting rights agency or a judge, right? And so pre-clearance is the tool that has been used to stop voter suppression around the country in the past, and it's what we would need in New Jersey to have a strong Voting Rights Act. Second, same-day voter registration. I think you probably all know something the league's been advocating for over the past year or more. It is currently stalled in the Senate, but we will continue to advocate for it. And I wanted to raise up all the ways that all of you can get involved. So you can first, of course, email your legislators, but we're also doing a postcard campaign where we're having postcard parties. You can sign up to write postcards, send them to your legislators with personalized messages about why this matters. We're also doing some canvases, actually knocking doors in Union County to get educate ordinary voters about this common sense change would let more people vote. And then you can also just sign up using this link about more ways to organize to find out other ways to get involved in the campaign. So I'll also add all of those links in the chat. But that is my last slides. So I think I'll stop my share here. And I guess we can open up for questions.
That's great, Phillip. Thanks so much. That was a very, very helpful presentation on all these issues. And I'll open up to questions. Oh, Norm already has his hand up. I'll save mine. Norm, you can go first. Norm, what's your question?
There we go, I'm unmuted. First of all, thank you for letting me jump in. It's a really quick question, but Phillip, fabulous presentation to really encapsulate a lot of this stuff that's going on. As far as calling the legislators tomorrow about the dirty money bill, what is the time, the best time that they start, or you start to have access to whatever mechanism there is to make such a call? How early can you do an effective call?
You know, I'd say their offices opening usually at 9. First thing in the morning, kind of call when they get in the office is probably the best, your best bet. The votes in the Assembly and the Senate respectively are at 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. So certainly before then, but I'd say when the office opens is best.
And they do listen, and whoever answers the phone will take your information. So if you say, I want to tell Senator Gill to vote against this, they'll write that down and pass that on. So.
Okay, and just the last thing, what was the designation of that bill, please?
The number
S2866 or A4372. It's called the Elections Transparency Act.
Could you put it in the chat, please?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
And Phillip, for the first vote, did it split along party lines in terms of the vote?
Yes, that's right. So
maybe describe that, because that might surprise people.
Yeah, so this bill had an interesting path through the legislature. Last year, when it was announced the first time, it actually had, both Republicans and Democrats on it. This year, when it came back, they added some of these amendments. The Republicans came off of it. And so when it was voted in the Senate, it was a 24-12 vote with 1 Democrat, Senator Neil Gill, voting no, and 3 Republicans voting yes.
Any other questions while you're thinking of them? I mean, I'll just also make a comment on the same day voter registration. We've signed up for the postcards. I'm just telling our members. And I'm hoping that at our next couple of socials and maybe even in our annual meeting, if we hold it in person, that we'll be doing postcard writing for same day voter registration as part of that. So look for those opportunities. Come to the social so you can also write postcards, have coffee and write postcards in support of same day voter registration. Phillip, sorry, Louise, go ahead.
Can't hear you, Lucas.
When votes are coming up, because I know I get your, contact this person, contact your legislator, and I don't know, have I already done that? Are we still working on the same thing, or have things been revised, or, have I answered your request is basically what happens.
Yeah, so basically each time that I've emailed everybody, it's because we have a new version of the bill. And the issue is that, they've made some tweaks each time, in some cases to make it, responsive to at least some notional concerns. And so I think it's important for legislators to hear, like, whatever changes they made, it's still a bad bill, right? So that's why continuing to email is actually helpful, because we had a lot of people who came out against it, at the end of February when it was revised with these amendments, and then the bill was pulled. And so now that it's come back with slight tweaks to the language, some people sort of use that as cover to vote for it. And I think that's why it's important to keep telling them, like, from our perspective, it's still not good.
Could you maybe tell us, like, when you send out the second call, can you probably maybe say a revision was made, please send it in again?
Yeah, I try to do that, but you're absolutely right. I should probably make that as explicit as possible. So, going forward, that's a good.
Yeah, because I think a lot of us, the rank and file, are not as close to the votes. When it's like, oh, was that vote last week or is this week? Is this round 2, round 3? Not everybody is as close to it. Philip, I have a question on the redistricting front. I mean, we have like 7 years to the next census, so everybody thinks, oh well, we don't have to worry about this. We're locked in, and we are in terms of the districts that we already have. But what were the main lessons learned in your mind? I mean, you said that it was positive in the sense that at least, even though we still have a bipartisan commission that whose main objective seems to protect incumbents, right? That's their main mission, not to really draw representative districts. How does one fight? Because I don't think they're going to change that, right? In New Jersey, they're going to, because unless you're forced to do that, no politician is going to want to give up the power to draw districts in their favor, even if you have to split the difference with your rival party. So how did the public process work? And did you feel like public pressure was brought to bear? And I mean, how does it work then if you try and get it to be more nonpartisan? And what can the public do? Because I mean, I got to tell you, when the New Jersey League came down and said, show up at these meetings and come with your maps. I'm like, come up with my map. Jeez, I barely know where my own town is, let alone drawing maps, for the district, I mean, how do we get the public more engaged in this? And
yeah, no, it's a good question. And I think you're absolutely right. You're not going to have, there's no world where we're going to have, everybody coming down with their own maps. That's always going to be, a small number of people, or, people who are doing it, professionally.
right.
But I do think that the key thing is educating the public about the fact that the way these districts are drawn, matters for everything, right? Because it determines substantially who gets elected for the entire decade in many cases, right? And so every other political issue that you care about, kind of flows from this. And so getting involved at this stage about when the maps are drawn is really critical to determine, what's going to happen in the state over the next 10 years. And I'd say, continuing to communicate that to people is the key. But also, having more public participation is great. Having more transparency is great. But also letting people know that it can be done differently. Like we said before, like New Jersey has this model. Back when it was put in place, it was considered, like kind of at the forefront of a better reform for the ways to do it. But, we've definitely fallen behind, because over the past 10, 20 years, lots of states have adopted citizen commissions where the individuals who are drawing the maps are ordinary citizens who apply and are selected semi-randomly. And the commissions are doing all of their work transparently and in the public. And it's a model that's worked. That's the solution to ending gerrymandering and to having fair maps. And so letting people know both that redistricting is really important because it affects all of these things, and also that there's a better way for redistricting to be done, I think is key. But you're right. I mean, if it's up to the legislators, they're never going to change the system.
No.
You need, and unlike some of those other states, like, California or Michigan, we don't have a citizen initiative process to put it on the ballot. So that's the avenue for reform that was used in many places. So the only other alternative is to really educate people. And, there's more awareness about, gerrymandering be a problem than maybe there has been in a long time. So continuing that education process to get people to really understand that this is a fundamental reform that's necessary That's the best I can give you.
Okay. No, that's good. That's helpful. Any other questions that people have? This is our expert from the league on this topic, and ask anything that you want, that and the other bills. I know same-day voter registration is a ways off still, from what I understand. But why is the Voting Rights Act not moving ahead?
To be honest with you, I don't think I know the full story on that. It's something that, Assemblywoman Reynolds Jackson in the Assembly has kind of been leading, and we're working on it last year, and it was introduced, and we had a public sort of campaign launch with people, some legislators talking about how great it was last month, and we don't have a committee date yet, so I don't know why. But hopefully we're going to keep working, and we'll have maybe later this year some.
I mean, because even just symbolically, even though New Jersey, is not at, doesn't have the kind of restrictive voting laws of other states, but just, proactively, like in the area of reproductive rights, just to be safe, that at least in, at the state level, we're protecting, our rights. It just seems like good strategy to me. So
yeah, and there was a state level Voting Rights Act passed in New York just last year.
Right,
That's
right.
moving in Connecticut. Like this is something that's happening, and New Jersey should be at the forefront too.
Right. Good. Jane Harvey, did one of you? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. That was a comprehensive report. Is there opportunity along the process? If they're voting now, I guess it's too late, but for citizen input along the way, or for nonprofits to or other organizations to present alternative plans in the process?
Are you talking about redistricting or the
redistricting?
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things we advocated for was to have the commissions allow individuals, nonprofits, other orgs to submit their own map proposals, right? So that was something that the commission agreed to do, right? And so they had a place on their website where you could, upload your map. But I mean, it wasn't the easiest thing. It wasn't the most intuitive thing. So I think you look around the country, you look at places like California, where they have like their own map making tool on their website, and they have dozens of sessions, going over a whole year, where they teach people how to use it, right? So there's a lot more that could be done to have the commissions, really not only open the door to public participation, but really go out into the community and try to welcome it and try to solicit it. So I think that's kind of something that I would like to see next time, is a commission that's not just sitting back and saying, okay, well, you can send it to us, but is actually really soliciting more public input.
But it's unusual, or how unusual is it that a bipartisan commission, as opposed to the winners, set the districts for 10 years?
It's really unusual. I think for state legislative districts, it's always been, one team's map gets picked or the others. The independent tiebreaker either goes with the R's or with the D's, and that's how it's been every single time. And so this was an exception, right?
Thank you.
I have to ask this. Does everyone know what district you're in? I'm not going to leave here tonight to make sure that everybody knows what state district you're now in. Everyone's comfortable? Everybody knows what state district you're in now? Okay, good. That was the real objective of the meeting, is to make sure that everybody knows if you're moving into a new district, what the district is and what you should be looking out for in terms of information for the elections coming up. Any other questions? Philip, we have them. No?
I could ask a lot of questions. But
Well, no, go ahead, Louise, we have him. So
I'm in the wonderful District 40. So we have, we have representatives who don't even want to talk to us. So it's, but one of the things that happened was We have, I don't know if it's peculiar to Passaic County, but we have a board of elections with 4 commissioners on it, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. Last election, the general election, we actually had one of these fellows pulling off campaign signs for the opposing party from lawns.
Oh.
Now, yeah, so a couple of the mayors wrote letters of protest. Nothing happened. Where would you, I mean, I wrote a letter to, the governor, and what do you do about something like that? I mean, where there's obvious craziness. These commissioners are not taking their job seriously, and this is who we're looking to keep the election going smoothly.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a tough question. I honestly don't know what the recourse is in a case like this. I mean, presumably they're appointed for terms, and I mean, making sure that they don't get reappointed as much as you can. I mean,
Do you have like a county clerk, election clerk? Louise? You must.
Yeah.
Bring it up with them too, because he's as an elected official. Sometimes the elected official is more responsive than the appointed ones. You know what I mean? I also, I don't know. I would also try and publicize it. You know,
Well, we had a couple of towns writing letters, and it was written up, mayors.
in the local newspapers, it was written up in the local newspapers. Yeah.
And of course, we had some of the towns, and it went split pretty much according to party. The fellow who was ripping the signs was in one party, and they said, oh, there was nothing wrong with that. But the other towns where the majority was the other way, they were the towns that were taking action on it. Nothing.
I don't know. I think we should talk about that at a board meeting and see, because I think I need to do research too as to whether even the local police could be involved in something like that. Because of people going on private property and taking what's not theirs down. That might even be breaking a local law, but I don't know.
Donna?
Yeah.
Well, this is many years ago when my son was in high school. He had friends who went around town taking away the school board signs,
Oh boy.
and the police did get involved.
I'm sure they did.
16 and 17, so, I assume that the police do have some territory on these. And
I'm
these
sure they
all,
do.
and it was all like honors kids just out for a joyride. And instead of the good old days when we would have had to bring it back to the house and say we were sorry, they got hauled down to the police station, and this was at night, and the parents were called, and so so it does happen,
This is when you want to make sure you got everybody's Ring cameras.
Oh, right, that's
The evidence.
yeah.
So, if we can, if you have evidence that you can take to the police on who's behind it, hearsay, then they might be able to take action.
Yeah.
What else? Any other thoughts? Okay. Susan, go ahead.
Hi, Philip. I had a question about the ERIC system. Are you familiar with that? I've been reading a lot of articles about it, and it appears that New Jersey is part of the ERIC system. If you could just kind of talk about what you probably know about it better than me, if you could just let people know what it is, and that I believe New Jersey participates.
Yeah, so New Jersey, actually, unlike some of the other states, is actually recently joining ERIC. And ERIC is this consortium of states. It's been around for a good number of years now, and it's a consortium for sharing voter file data. And the idea is if states are cooperating, then they can, for example, track to see if someone is voting in 2 different states. And so you think it's a pretty common sense thing to make sure that there's not voter fraud and to do list maintenance so that, we can fix duplicates in the voter rolls and keep them accurate. And so for a long time, it's been a very sort of technical, kind of a wonky, kind of a, non-controversial kind of a thing for dealing with voter fraud and voter list maintenance. Just recently, as I think, Susan's suggesting, there's been some states that have been pulled out, that are pulling out of ERIC. And basically, it's not really based on anything except that, some of the guys who started ERIC at the very beginning don't have politics that those states like, essentially is the issue. And so there's this allegation that, oh, if, this person is somehow, more progressive, who started this organization many years ago, then somehow it's not to be trusted. And that's not really based on anything, but unfortunately with election misinformation and conspiracy theories being what they are, that's resulted in some states pulling out.
And when did we join? Because our voter rolls are so overstated at this point. I can't imagine that we've been there long, very long.
It just last year.
Oh, okay. We should see, because I think Montclair has something like 39,000 voters register, and there's like 40,000 people, including children, in the town. So it was very overstated.
And just to follow that, I just got a jury appearance for my brother-in-law, who hasn't been in my house for like 30 years. We're not sure where he is. We think he's in North Carolina. And we had a call, but I had sent back and called the Board of Elections many times with his sample ballot telling him he doesn't live here. And now he, if we had to notify them, but we just left a message. So I'm not sure if he'll get a, summons to, because he didn't report to jury duty. So it affects jury duty with that. So we have to really I don't think people realize how each level, our address, our mail, our real estate tax, our, our driver's license, affects your jury duty. So it's, so.
Harvey, did you want us to ask? Were you asking something?
Yes. This electoral college compact, where states agree to cast all of their electoral votes for the national popular vote winner. I think they're up to about 190 electoral votes. I should know the answer to this. Is New Jersey signed on to that?
Yes, New Jersey signed on pretty early on in the compact.
Okay. Are you aware of any progress they're making beyond the 190 committed electoral votes?
I haven't seen anything recently on it. I think, I don't know what states are on the threshold that they might be trying to get at this point. I think a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been picked, but I don't know if Minnesota's ratified it, or Michigan. Maybe those are states that I think they might be going after, but haven't moved yet.
Speaking of electoral college, Louise has been working with the League in Illinois, Louise, to do. We're hoping that at some point it's going to be ready so that we can do a presentation on abolishing the electoral college, right, Louise?
Yeah, it's I think at the annual meeting, the president said that's our long-term goal. And just, so we're supposedly next month they're going to be kicking off something, starting to educate people on the electoral college and what it means, what we can do about it. So
that'll be a big league initiative, like, the Voting Rights Act or same-day voter registration. So when that's ready, we will want to have that come forward as a program that we could do for a monthly meeting like this. So, but it's not ready yet. So, but when it is, we'll bring it forward. Louise is monitoring that for us.
Well, the advantage of this other movement is that it doesn't require a constitutional amendment. And the small states would never give up their disproportionate power. So I think that's a very, very heavy lift.
Right.
But actually, the two states who have pro forma or whatever, what the right word is, but not pro forma, having a senior moment here, but proportional are Maine and Nebraska. So they are two small states, just interestingly enough.
Interesting. Good. Anything else? Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna let Philip go. Again, Philip, thanks so much. Very, very helpful.
Great.
Thank
You'll
you,
send me the
Philip.
slides because those
Wonderful
slides are great. So we'll,
I will send you the slides.
great. Anything else that anybody wants to say? Did I cut you off? Go ahead, Louise. Yep.
I know we just had a meeting, what was it, the other day, where Asana was in charge, trying to get people involved in the state committees that are out there and looking for people, and lobbying, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure Phil could talk more about it. The committee I signed up for, I don't know what'll happen, but Phil, I had asked you, will we ever have a Santos Act in New Jersey? And you then said to me, that's the government committee. So I signed up for the government committee. So I'll
I mean, it's a fair
Fair
point.
point.
We
Yeah.
can work on. I mean, I face it now. We used to have in our slides, when we go into high schools on where can you find, fact-based information about candidates. And one of the sources we said were candidate websites. But now
You can't do
Take that
that.
out.
You can't
we
do
got
that.
to take that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, all right, guys. Oh, go ahead, Doris. Yeah, go ahead.
That reminds me that Louise is doing the candidates information, the 911 vote.
Yeah, vote 411.
411,
Yes.
right. And so the league really needs to have a big disclaimer because everything is what the candidates say.
They provide, right, exactly. We don't vet it. We don't fact check anything. You're right. Right, we don't have the bandwidth to do that, right?
So maybe the state league should also think about that.
So can bring that idea back.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, last chance. All right, thanks, everybody. Good to see you all, and hopefully I'll see you at a social or one of our other upcoming events soon. Or tomorrow night, Essex County panel should be good, so.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks again. Thank you again, Philip. Terrific
Wonderful.
job.
Thank you.
Yes,
All right,
thank you,
bye-bye.
Philip. That was a really very interesting, you brought up topics